Go for it.
Hey everyone, it's V the Gorilla Economist coming to you live on another special Rogue Money interviews. We have a very special guest today, the one and only Chris Dunn. He is the man, the myth, the legend. He is another baron on the kingdom called Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. He is all about entrepreneurship. He's all about creating people, creating opportunities, self-education, and investing. Chris has a very successful YouTube channel. You guys can go check it out. Just type in Chris Dunn and boom, he will come out. And you can also see his website at chrisdunn.com. With that being said, Chris, what's up, buddy? It is an honor to have you on, sir. How's it going?
What's going on, fellas? Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure. Chris, there's so many things happening. I saw your recent video where you had to quell everybody's fears when Bitcoin, smashed over 1,000, and then we had a little pullback there, and people were panicking, like, the sky's falling, run for the hills. And, you had some very, very wise things to say. But, hey, man, wherever you want to begin, bro. So, let's talk about, I guess we can start off with that rise in prices that did not catch you by surprise for sure. And the pullback and where the currency is and where it's going.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's definitely been interesting lately, and I kind of think it's funny how the media doesn't really, the mainstream media at least, CNBC and all those guys, they don't really like to talk about Bitcoin until the price is doubled, tripled, or quadrupled, which kind of creates this boom and bust price pattern that's happened over half a dozen times now over the past few years. And it's kind of like, everybody ignores Bitcoin when it's cheap, and then it gets expensive, and then that's when I get the calls and emails and stuff like, Chris, should I buy? And I'm like, well, it's quadrupled in the past 6 months. You tell me. So that's why I did that video. I just wanted to kind of explain why that happened, and obviously there's some fundamental stuff that caused it with timing. Like the reason why it fell on a specific day was due to Chinese regulators making some comments, and that typically happens too. Every time Bitcoin's price goes crazy, the Chinese government starts to make comments and take a closer look at it, because the fact is that a large majority of trading volume actually comes from China, because there's a lot of capital controls and stuff like that over there, and people are just really into that as a store of value and a way to move money around. And so that's kind of, I guess, why the price crashed. It was on fears, but it's also just the same thing that we see with the news bringing light to the fact that Bitcoin had a big price move, which creates late investors getting into the game. And then once there's no greater fools, then it crashes and everybody panics. And that's where smart investors start to step in and accumulate.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely correct, man. And the funny thing is, it's so typical of most investors. They buy high and they sell low. Yeah,
Yeah, it's great. Everybody knows buy low, sell high, but there's a reason why most people do the exact opposite. And that's why I do those videos. I just want to kind of help people understand just the right way to think about the markets. And, if you have the right beliefs and the right perceptions about the markets, then that's going to lead to the right actions, which is going to ultimately, hopefully, lead to the right results.
Absolutely correct, man. And the thing with that whole, Chinese thing, and, the funniest thing is, like, nobody read further into it. Like, I haven't, it's like China was never out there saying we're gonna, do this to Bitcoin. No, they were going after the exchanges yet again. It's like it's the funniest thing, and then people panicking.
Yeah. They basically came out and said we're doing on-site checks, and everybody freaked out. It's like, no, this is the same thing they do every time Bitcoin goes up. And granted, I think they're putting some limitations on leverage trading and stuff like that, which I think is okay. But yeah, I mean, it's the same story over and over again.
Absolutely, man. So Chris, let me ask you a question. What got you into Bitcoin, man?
So I actually first heard about it in 2011. I had a hedge fund buddy of mine that I highly respect. He's way smarter than I am. And he was like, Chris, check this out, this Bitcoin thing. And this is after it had its first kind of boom and bust pattern. And I looked at the chart and I'm like, I don't understand it. It sounds like a scam. It sounds like a penny stock pump and dump. I don't have time for it. At the time I was more into the traditional stock market. And so a couple of years later in 2013, it did it again. Price ramped up and it had another pattern. And I said, okay, maybe I should pay attention to this because, it's not going away. If anything, the market cap's growing, user adoption's growing. So I put some time into studying it, and I was like, wow, this actually might get legs. There might be something here. And so in the end of 2013, you know, a lot of people know that price went from about 100 to over 1,000 in just a few weeks. And that's when I actually did my first blog post and video on Bitcoin. And it was actually negative. I was like, look, guys, I think Bitcoin's cool, but you know, please be careful. And look, I'm not a financial advisor or anything like that, so I can't tell you what to do with your money, but I think there's substantial risk here. And sure enough, over the next year, throughout 2014, Bitcoin went from over 1,000 down into the 100s again. So, you know, the way that I approach it is kind of twofold. Like I like it as an investment long term, but you know, it's all about timing. But I also like it as a trading vehicle. You know, the volatility is really great, and what scares your average investor is actually really attractive for active traders.
Yeah. Absolutely. What are some of the things that you love about Bitcoin, man, that, you know, that you've learned to love about it? Some of the aspects that really, you know, stood out for you?
Well, so I'm just a geek for entrepreneurship. I love innovation. I love creators. You know, that's why I do YouTube videos and help young entrepreneurs. For example, I'm a part of a nonprofit that's rolling out the first K through 12 entrepreneurship pathway. So it's
Wow.
basically teaching kids about entrepreneurship from literally kindergarten through high school. And then in their 11th and 12th grade year, they get the opportunity to pitch to real angel investors here in Austin, Texas. And so that's my passion. And what I love about Bitcoin is it quite literally democratizes money and makes it a level playing field for people that have in areas with repressive regimes or capital controls. And so I'll just give you a couple quick use cases. I was actually in Myanmar, you know, formerly Burma,
Yeah.
last year, and I have a couple of friends there that are into entrepreneurship and helping locals. And so when I went there, they set up a pitch day for me, and we had all these entrepreneurs come in and they pitched, and I consulted with them and gave some advice. And I said, well, what is your biggest challenge in doing business in Myanmar? And everybody said the same thing, which was, you know, basically getting merchant accounts and having access to the global economy. And, you know, because for anybody that knows the history of Burma, you know, it's been a very repressive regime over the past several decades. And they went from being one of the wealthiest nations in Asia to the poorest.
Yeah.
And people are afraid of banks. They're afraid of the government stealing their money. So it's literally a cash under the bed situation. And because of that, people have been limited to doing business with people that they can see face to face. So when I explained how Bitcoin is borderless, permissionless money, and they could do business with people all around the world without having to get approved for a merchant account, it just really opened their eyes, and just gave a lot of people hope where they thought there was none. And then just a few months ago, I was down in Central America, kind of doing some investigative work on the hyperinflation problem down in Venezuela.
Yeah.
And I was in Panama City, and I was talking to this waitress who was Venezuelan,
Hmm.
and she was sending money home to her mother who was really sick. She was in Caracas in Venezuela, and she was trying to send money home. And she was explaining how difficult it was to get money to her mom and how much value she was losing because of the currency controls, or excuse me, hyperinflation, and trying to send money home. So I explained Bitcoin, and there's a few startups down there that are really trying to help people in that situation,
Yeah.
connected her with some of those folks. So Bitcoin to me is more than just a market to speculate in. I mean, that's great, but my real passion and the reason why I'm in it is to help those real world use cases. And I feel like a lot of people in the West, in America, and you know, places like that, they don't see Bitcoin in their day to day life, so
Sure.
they still kind of think of it as this weird magic internet money that doesn't really have an effect on their life, and that's because we haven't really had a need for it in the US. You know, we have access to basic banking services, but in places like Myanmar, in places like Venezuela and Argentina, it's actually having real world use cases that are affecting real lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing in Greece, same thing in India, same thing in anywhere where repressive governments or out of control government policies are ruining and stifling local economies and their ability to, to utilize money, destroying the fungibility of money, destroying the utility of money, with all these capital controls and whatnot, man. You hit a real point, man. You said, Bitcoin's great for, democratizes money, especially from, repressive regimes. Even though we in the West, we don't have a repressive regime. Well, some would argue that we do, but but we're not as bad as it is in many parts of the third world. But that being said, we still have and you said it best, Chris, a level playing field that, and we don't have a level playing field in terms of access to money. What I mean by that is this: when you look at the top, 0.0001% that are the the tycoons of like your major investment banks and whatnot, they have access to the printing press. They have access to the Fed. And that's something that we don't have. And even if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you're running a business, you're an entrepreneur, you're running a successful business, you don't have the type of favor that someone would have in the halls of power that has access to that printing press. And that's what it's become right now. It's amazing to me see the changes in our nation over the last several decades, where as we transition from capitalism to what we have today, a type of cartelism, where it's graft, it's subterfuge, it's he who has favor. It's like the very thing that Ayn Rand always warned us about, is those who are traders of favor. They're trading favors instead of actually trading something of value. And that's what we've pretty much become in the West. And we're seeing, the good thing about 2016, we're seeing a lot of that starting to change in Western countries, where people are demanding a pushback against all this global tyranny, so to speak, especially in the West, man. So you made a very good point, Chris. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, man. I mean, it's really inspiring when you see people that like had very little to no hope, and then you have just a tool like Bitcoin or even the internet, just all these decentralized tools that really give the little guy an edge.
Yeah.
I've seen the Wall Street and the traditional markets go from I mean, for lack of a better word, kind of a fair playing field to, over the past 15 years, just it's really morphed into something disgusting and run by high frequency algorithms and all this manipulation. And so I actually used to be a day trader, and I just noticed over the years how much more difficult it became for the little guy to really compete in that environment. But decentralized currencies and stuff like that are starting to give the power or just the opportunity back to people. And it's the thing I love is it's borderless. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're in Washington, D.C. or Wall Street, or if you're in Venezuela or Myanmar. Everybody has the same tools and the same resources now.
Absolutely. And the best part is, like, with the proper coaching, like the kind of things that you do, Chris, the services you would offer, just, you're gung-ho about entrepreneurship. I mean, case in point, man, look at the guys in Venezuela. Horrible situation. I mean, people are eating cats and dogs. They got no toilet paper. They have a food crisis. They have all sorts of Forex issues. I mean, you name it. But there's some creative people that said, hey, you know what? Here's one thing we have in this socialist utopia that's going to hell in a handbasket. For the time being, we have free electricity. So they start Bitcoin mining, man. They're utilizing that free electricity, start running servers, man, and come up with real solutions, bro. So
yeah, it's cool. I mean, people will find a way. People are resilient, and I have faith in people. They're people get into these situations and they realize, well, you can't rely on a government, and it doesn't matter who you get in office. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or neither. At the end of the day, you have to take personal responsibility and find your own way, and it's cool to see that happening.
Absolutely. Chris, back on entrepreneurship, man, you are gung-ho about it. You're passionate about it. You see the importance of it. You're involved in nonprofits that are helping to teach kids entrepreneurship from K through 12. You're doing your part to empower the next generation of Americans. This is a country that at one time was built by entrepreneurs. Like 90% of people were all like entrepreneurs at one point. I mean, it was a ridiculous, insane amount. Everybody had a business, or if they were working, they had a side hustle. Everybody was at some level an entrepreneur. And I see your passion. I can sense it. What are some of the projects you're working on right now, number one? And number two, what are the advice that you have, especially that, I believe that, going into 2017, yes, we have challenges ahead, but I think there's a tremendous opportunity in the midst of the challenge. I think there's some great opportunities for those who get who needs a kick in the rear to get off their rear ends, to start being innovative, to start being imaginative. what are some of the things that you see in the horizon as somebody who's on the forefront of entrepreneurship, bro?
Great question, man. I think we're currently going through a shift between what I call like the resume based economy and the skill based economy.
Yeah.
So, when I was in high school, like 15 years ago, the narrative was go to college, get good grades, go to college, get a secure job. Right. And I think where that shifted is, I think people are going to, like the percentage of people that are freelancers or solopreneurs, I think is going to go through the roof over the next decade. It's already starting to change, and a lot of people realize that you can't rely on a single corporation in a lot of cases to provide for you for life, right? That the economy's just changed. And so the skill-based economy to me means show me what your tangible skill sets are. Don't show me some puffed up resume with your friends as references. And, even college degrees are starting to lose their weight a little bit. Now, obviously not in all industries, and they're really important for doctors and things like that. But if you're an entrepreneur or you're somebody who wants to take control over your own destiny, then it's really about developing the skills that are relevant today, right? And so my passion and my focus right now is on my for-profit company, which is called Skill Incubator. And I'm currently rolling out and partnering with people that are experts in very specific specialized fields, be it investing. We have one of the top hedge fund traders who's now retired, going to start teaching, investing to the mass public. Also, everything from computer programming, right on down to real estate, just anything that's specialized knowledge that you don't need permission or a degree, from a major university to do and to start creating income for yourself. That's really my passion.
That's awesome, man. And what are some of the things that like specifically, like, like what would you say to the average person who's like, hey man, maybe should I try to find a job, or B, like take the reins and go out and be an entrepreneur? Like, what are some of the I mean, obviously your website has a great deal of services and things that you provide, but also, what are some of the tools that helped you? Like, what fostered you to become an entrepreneur?
Right. Well, let me leave with this. I'll say, like, when some people hear the word entrepreneurship, they think of like, Zuckerberg and Facebook. Like, and a lot of people are like, look, I don't want to try to build the next Facebook, because, the reality is that a lot of entrepreneurs actually fail. A lot of businesses fail. So there's different levels of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship to me might mean, just being a freelancer, developing a skill set and then working through a site like Upwork or something where you basically, provide a service. And instead of just working for one company, you're a solopreneur and you work with multiple people and you have control over your time and who you work with and what your rates are. So you don't have to be like a tech startup founder to be considered an entrepreneur. My history, I actually started my first business when I was 16. It was a car detailing business.
Nice.
And so I learned the hustle, the grind. I learned just the
literally
value of hard work.
Literally the grind.
Yeah. I mean, we were out, knocking doors, going to office complexes, and just getting down and dirty, and I think that kind of gave me the passion for what could be, and helped me see that, like, look, I suck in school, I'm failing, I'm bored, but when it comes to entrepreneurship and building something and creating something, I just get lit up about it, right? So and that's something I've been thinking about the past couple of years, is like, can you really teach entrepreneurship? I don't think everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur, but there are certainly ways that you can design your life to where you have more control.
Right. Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly, man. So, back on Bitcoin, man, what are some of the things that are facing Bitcoin in terms of challenges? Where do you see any new technological developments that you see coming forward in the forefront of Bitcoin and adoption, and how are what are the new technologies and new things that are out there that are helping people adopt Bitcoin?
Yeah. Well, so let me say this. There are a lot of people in the space that are way smarter than I am, that understand just the technical side of Bitcoin. I'm actually not a coder. So when it comes to that, I can't really speak intelligently. But all I know is there are some issues with Bitcoin, scaling issues, and there are problems to work through that I certainly don't have the answers to. And I really don't even have that strong of an opinion on. But I have faith that a decentralized currency. I don't know if it's Bitcoin or something else. I'll just lead with this. I think currency competition is one of, if not the best things to happen to capitalism this century.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's kind of taken it for granted that, the US dollar has been the world reserve currency. Is that going to tumble tomorrow? Is it, there's so many different angles that you could make arguments for. I don't know. But all I know is looking at the data, the growth and user adoption is going up every day. And India, who, as you guys probably know, they recently made like 85% of their paper currency legal, and they're putting limitations on gold and stuff like that. India has 1 billion more people than the US.
Yeah.
So I'll just kind of propose my opinion as a question, like, what would happen if even a small percentage of India started using Bitcoin in their day-to-day lives, or maybe not even as a daily medium of exchange or money, but as more of a store of value? Right. And I think that's part of why the price went up so quickly, is that was right around that time that things were going down in India. But, we're starting to see unrest around the world, and we're starting to see people realize, like, hey, maybe fiat currency isn't all that. Maybe there is something to this decentralized, math-based, trustless money that, maybe we have more faith in fully transparent code than we do in politicians.
Absolutely, 1,000%, man. And you bring up you bring up some very valid points. What would happen if it was just a small percentage of people that are in India adopt Bitcoin? And you also talked about earlier those that are underserved by banks. And the truth of the matter is, man, it's like, you look. I mean, we're really spoiled in the West, and the problem with us is, like, we take for granted like our banking services. And then on the top of that, we think that the rest of the world have access to the same types of banking services that we do. And the reality is, you have what, 6.34 billion people in the world that are right now either unbanked or underbanked.
Yeah.
And that's a huge adoption group. And I think a couple of people made the point where if you look at like an African village, right? It's like, you have this village, it has no running water, it has no electricity, and they have like a solar panel, and there's that solar panels is connected to a smartphone, like a basic smartphone, and that smartphone is used by the village to find out what the local weather conditions are, the local news, as well as prices on the commodities market, so they can go ahead and sell their farm, their farm products and stuff, their farm wares. And that's a huge thing. I mean, think about it. You don't have running water, but you have a smartphone. And that's the power of Bitcoin. It's literally, it can be anywhere. And like you said, man, what happens when a small percentage of India starts doing it? What happens when a small percentage of Africa starts doing it? And that, I mean, look at the West. We're about to face, like, already, we all know that there's a bubble in the bond market. We've been tiptoeing around it. We've been like, people, I think investors are going to figure out a way. Hey, you know what? We need to get something that's an alternative to the bonds. Just a small percentage of those people that are looking for a little bit more of a safety net. What's going to happen when they get involved in like something like Bitcoin? My God, it's going to be through the roof, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would just, caution anybody to, when it comes to like thinking of future growth, like it's very easy to get caught up in the predictions of Bitcoin 10,000 or Bitcoin a million.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
so I would just caution people, like, before you invest, like, learn as much as you can. And, the thing with Bitcoin is it's very, very risky, right? There are some issues with it. And I think you just want to really understand as much as you can before you, like, just speculate and hope that it goes up. Right. But with that said, I do see some pretty big potential upside if user adoption and growth stays on the track that it is right now.
I agree wholeheartedly, man. And the most exciting thing about Bitcoin, for me personally, it's not just the Bitcoin itself, man. The blockchain technology, what a game changer, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to change everything from, supply chain management to real estate transactions, healthcare infrastructure. Like, the guys over at Factum, which are also based here in Austin, like, they're just doing a really good job working with governments, I believe Honduras and China, and they're just trying to find creative ways to use the blockchain technology to, create trustless systems. Again, trusting open, transparent math over politicians.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so one more question. how does the average person, how can, what's the best way for them to get Bitcoin?
So there's really two major ways to buy Bitcoin, either in person through a site like Local Bitcoins, or through an exchange. So if you're in the U.S. or one of the major countries in the West, Coinbase has been one of the most mainstream or most popular places to kind of get started. And I'll just say this, like, don't use or don't think of Bitcoin exchanges as a bank account, because think of Bitcoin as like digital gold. If you own it and you control it and it's in your possession, you have it. If it's on an exchange, you really don't have access to it. So again, I just encourage everybody, just learn about it. Even if you are still saying like, look, this is BS, it's a scam, it's a bubble, it's whatever, learn what you can about it. I was very, very skeptical. It took me 2 years to really look at it and even give it a chance. And there is a chance that it could fail. I don't think it's going to. But I just think currency competition is one of the most amazing things that we're going to see this century. And there's going to be some unrest. There's going to be some wealth created. And it's not going to be a smooth ride. There's already been several big challenges along the way over the past few years for Bitcoin. And I think there's going to be several in the coming years. But, I just encourage everybody to learn what they can.
Absolutely. Very well said and very empowering. Chris, why don't you give out your contact information, your website, and how people can get a hold of you and how they can follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Chris Dunn TV everywhere on social media, chrisdunn.com. And yeah, I mean, if I can answer any questions or help anybody, that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. And with that being said, folks, you've been listening to V and Chris Dunn and my main man CJ, who is the denizen of the airways, who is making sure that the dilithium crystals and the flux capacitors are working correctly, so this airwaves and this broadcast will come out spotless. With that being said, guys, thank you all for listening in, and tune in next time for another interview series. We are over and we're out.